Hello! So, I thought it could be a fun idea to rank all of the Pokemon found exclusively in Brilliant Diamond and not Shining Pearl. If you're wondering why Brilliant Diamond and not Shining Pearl, the answer is that I'm doing a companion video with this that are only the Pokemon exclusive to Shining Pearl. At the end, we'll talk about which game is the better exclusive Pokemon and why, but for now, I hope you enjoyed the video. So these are sorted in alphabetical order. We'll just be going through them like that, just to hide any bias, although I did save Dialga for last because that felt appropriate. So first up we have Arbok. Now Arbok is a Pokemon that traditionally is thought of as being pretty weak. I think in a general tier list it'd probably rank it towards one of the bottom. What we have to remember is that we're ranking these in the context of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which is a limited Pokedex. Right off the gate, I'm going to say something pretty controversial. I actually think Arbok is B tier. That's pretty high for a Pokemon like Arbok ordinarily, but the reason I'm putting Arbok so high is that it actually has access to the ability Intimidate. Intimidate is one of the best abilities in competitive Pokemon, and there's not going to be as many users of it in a limited dex. And so Arbok has decent base dex that has access to Intimidate, it has access to some good support moves like Glare, Coil, and so for those reasons, I do think that it's at least a decent Pokemon. If you really love Arbok, I think this is a good format for it. Next up we have Arcanine. Now Arcanine also is an Intimidate Pokemon. It's just coincidence that the two Intimidate Pokemon are first and second. I really do think Arcanine in this format is S tier. In 2017, Arcanine was very, very popular, and it's because it was the best Intimidator in the format. And I think that it's pretty likely that Arcanine is also going to be the best Intimidator in these games as well. On top of that, Arcanine just has a really good move pool. It has access to Morning Sun, Will-O-Wisp, Flare Blitz, Extreme Speed, Close Combat, Wild Charge, just a lot of good support moves, and it also has pretty decent base stats across the board. It can be physical or special, Flare Blitz or Overheat as primary stab moves, it can be supportive, it can be offensive. It's a really flexible Pokemon, and the ability Intimidate is just so valuable. Next up we have Butterfree. Now again, Butterfree is similar to Arbok in that Butterfree actually is a Pokemon where ordinarily there's better alternatives. You'd almost never want to use Butterfree when you could use something like Amoonguss. Even Vivillon is a Pokemon that typically does Butterfree's role except better. However, this is in the context of Gen 4 and below, and Vivillon and Amoonguss aren't Pokemon in that category. I actually am also going to put Butterfree a bit higher than I think some people would probably put it, just because I think that Butterfree is actually okay. I think it has some good things going for it. It has access to Rage Powder, it has access to Sleep Powder. Sleep Powder plus Compound Eyes is actually really strong, giving you a pretty big accuracy buff. It also may have access to Tailwind. I'll have to double check that one in the current games, but I believe it should have access to Tailwind, as well as decent offensive moves in Bug Buzz and Hurricane. When you combine all these individual factors, it actually makes a pretty decent support Pokemon. Give it a Focus Sash, give it Protect, and it can actually be pretty disruptive. Now, it's not going to be amazing by any means, but it will be pretty disruptive and has access to some unique supporting capabilities, so I do think it's actually a pretty decent Pokemon. Next up we have Dugong. Now Dugong is a Pokemon that normally isn't considered to be super good, and I would probably stick with that. Dugong is interesting because it actually has pretty good base stats and a decent move pool, but it really lacks the coverage moves, although it has the supporting moves. And the typing is okay. Ice and Water isn't awful. Ice isn't a very good defensive type. Water makes up for that a little bit, but most of the time, Dugong is going to get stuck on the field not really doing much. So for that reason, I'm putting it in the C tier. I don't think it's a bad Pokemon. It has access to Fake Out, it has access to Ice Beam, Ice Shard, Surf, Encore, Disable, Horn Drill, or Sheer Cold if you're feeling really feisty. I think most of the time it's easy to ignore, and I don't think the support it offers provide enough value. So for that reason, I'm putting it in the C tier. I have Electabuzz and Electivire in different tiers here because Electabuzz is actually faster than Electivire, and thanks to the Eviolite item, you can actually justify using Electabuzz. So yeah, we're going to rank them separately. So Electabuzz, I think is actually interesting compared to Electivire because Electabuzz is typically going to be a special attacker. I'm going to put it in the C tier as well as Dugong. The reason is that Electabuzz actually has pretty decent stats across the board. If you give it an Eviolite, it's got pretty good bulk. It's actually base 105 speed, which is rather fast, especially in a limited format, outspeeding stuff like Garchomp. However, the thing about Electabuzz is that it doesn't really have good coverage moves. It's pretty much locked into only using electric moves. Thunderbolt is the main one, obviously, Volt Switch, Electroweb. I don't think that that's enough to really bump it up a tier, like similar to Dugong in that it has limited coverage, it has pretty decent bulk, it's moderately fast. Dugong is moderate fast, Electabuzz is actually kind of fast. Not an awful Pokemon though, so if Electabuzz is your favorite, you can definitely use it. Electivire though, I'm actually going to put in the B tier, and the reason Electivire is higher than Electabuzz, despite being slower, and I think with Eviolite factored in, it's probably not as bulky, but the thing is that Electivire actually has really good base attack. So while Electabuzz is a special attacker, Electivire is a physical attacker, and although you lose some speed and you lose some bulk, you get access to moves like Fire Punch and Ice Punch, which means you can have actual coverage moves on this Pokemon, and that's a big deal. Next up we have Entei. So actually I'm going to rank Entei, Suicune, and Raikou all at once because I think that makes sense. Of the dogs, I think Entei is either A or S tier. Sacred Fire is one of the best attacking moves in the game, although it does miss occasionally. It misses a lot when I use it actually. The ability to burn is just so valuable, and Entei also has really good base stats. Legendary Pokemon typically are allowed in competitive Pokemon. Pokemon like Entei actually would be legal compared to a Pokemon Pokemon like Ho, which is classified as a restricted Pokemon, so wouldn't be legal in a lot of formats, but Entei should be legal in nearly any format that it's obtainable in. And so for that reason, I think that it's actually probably going to be one of the better Pokemon. Inner Focus, it was just given a buff to as well. And the thing about Inner Focus is that it prevents not only flinching, but also Intimidate. So you can't Intimidate Entei, you can't flinch it. Also, because there's going to be less Intimidate, I think the physical Pokemon will be probably better in the format as well. And so having access to a move that burns 50% of the time in Sacred Fire is really valuable. Next up, we have Suicune. I'm putting Suicune in the S tier as well. Suicune is just a really good support Pokemon. Kind of what Dugong wishes it could be. It can't be flinched thanks to Inner Focus. It gets access to Scald, gets access to those nice ice moves like Ice Beam and Icy Wind. It also has access to Tailwind, which is actually pretty invaluable. Tailwind being a move that allows you to double your speed stats of your Pokemon on your side of the field for 4 turns, including the turn that you use it. So between Tailwind and Icy Wind, it's just a great support Pokemon. I know single players like to run Rest. You can run Citrus Berry on it for recovery. You can run Protect. You can run Snarl. Overall, a really, really good Pokemon in my opinion. Raikou, I'm going to put in the A tier. Now, I don't think Raikou is nearly as good as the other dogs, but if you look at the Pokemon in the B and C tier, Raikou is certainly better than them, so we're putting it in the A tier for now. Raikou also has Inner Focus, so it can't flinch. It struggles, I think, in that Entei and Suicune both do something very well. Entei being just a good physical attacker that also is really threatening to other physical attackers. That's really difficult to switch in on thanks to Sacred Fire's burn chance. Suicune being a great support Pokemon. Raikou doesn't do anything necessarily very well. It does have a really high base speed and good special attack. It can be a Calm Mind user. It has access to Thunderbolt. Electric is a really good type in general. I do think that Raikou kind of falls a little bit short of the other two. Still a good Pokemon. So I'm going to say something a little controversial there. I actually think Gligar might be A tier, I think. Gligar actually is kind of interesting in that it's really bulky with Eviolite. It has access to Hyper Cutter. It has access to really good support moves like Swords Dance, Agility, and Baton Pass, Feint, Knock Off. So many really interesting moves. And I think it could actually be pretty decent in this format. I mean, it's pretty bulky. As long as you're not fighting off against an Ice type or a Water type, it is good, really good defensive typing. Being immune to Electric and Ground always helps. Being a flying type that's not weak to Rock really helps. I think you could do some really interesting things. You could use Swords Dance with it, Baton Pass out because you can't get intimidated, give something +2, try and sweep. Yeah, I think it could actually be pretty decent. So I'm going to say something, and I think that it's as good as Raikou. I mean, you can do the same thing with Gliscor, I guess, so I should probably put it in the same tier. Gliscor doesn't have access to Eviolite, but it does get access to Toxic Orb plus Poison Heal, although then you can't run Hyper Cutter. I actually brought Gliscor to the World Championships in 2013. I do regret it, so it does feel weird to put Gliscor this high on the list. Maybe both these Pokemon should be in B tier, but I think that it could be kind of interesting, especially in double battles. The thing about Gliscor is that it really does lack a flying stab move. It's normally going to run Acrobatics as the flying move. However, like with Toxic Orb, you can't do that really effectively. So, yeah, I'm really interested to see if Gliscor and Gligar pan out as strong Pokemon. Ho, I mean, compared to the rest of the Pokemon on this list, Ho is definitely S tier. Within a restricted format, I would probably put Ho in like a B or C tier. Within a restricted format, within Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl is like a whole other thing because that's not going to happen most likely. So for now, let's just put Ho in the S tier. I think that it's a good Pokemon. I mean, it's the same thing as Entei, right? It has access to Sacred Fire, it has access to Regenerator rather than Inner Focus, which means you're better at surviving, worse at doing damage. Or, worse, I guess, just staying on the field without being intimidated, specifically. Yeah, I mean, I think Ho is a super solid Pokemon, and it's like, I mean, it doesn't feel fair to compare it to the rest of the Pokemon on this list, so I'm just gonna kind of leave it and move on. Honchkrow, I think, is actually really bad. I'm gonna put it in the C tier. I think Honchkrow is actually one of my favorite Pokemon, or it used to be. It's so bad that I've kind of not liked it as much recently, but it is interesting. It has access to Moxie, it has access to Sucker Punch, Brave Bird. It does hit really hard if you can get it to survive, but it's really frail, so most of the time I wouldn't recommend using it. Poor natural bulk, the poor natural speed doesn't really compensate for the fact that it does have, you know, really high offensive stats. You can also do the old Super Luck Scope Lens, crit every attack thing, which is pretty strong. Yeah, I don't have too much to say about Honchkrow. I just don't think it's that good of a Pokemon. I'm gonna put Kecleon in the D tier. Kecleon, that's not fair. I'm going to put Kecleon in the C tier. Kecleon is actually interesting because it has a couple unique things it can do thanks to the ability Color Change. You can do Color Change plus Skill Swap, though it's not going to be good most of the time. You can do Protean as well. Protean is actually really interesting because you could do Fake Out, Shadow Sneak, Sucker Punch, and just try and like play a guessing game with your opponent and changing your types before they attack. But it isn't a very good Pokemon. It has really low base physical defense, although it does have good special defense, and it gets stuck often just kind of being pretty mediocre. So I'm going to put Kecleon in the C tier. Mawile, I think, is our first D tier Pokemon. Mawile's funny because Mega Mawile is so incredible. Mawile has like almost everything going for it. It has Intimidate and has, in my opinion, the best typing in the game. You can check out my typing combination video if you're interested in learning more about that. But for now, I would actually say Mawile is pretty bad, almost entirely because of the base stats. The stats of Mawile are just, they're really atrocious. I mean, they had to give Mega Mawile huge power, which literally doubles its attack stat to make it like viable. And granted, it was more than viable. It was good, but Without huge power, without, you know, an Intimidate that turns into huge power, without that extra bonus 100 stats that Mega Evolution gives, this Pokemon is just pretty much unusable in my opinion. Murkrow I'm actually going to put in the B or the A tier. I would probably put this in B+ if I had it on my tier list, but we'll put it in the B tier for now. It's a really solid support Pokemon. It gets access to Prankster, unlike Honchkrow. Prankster plus Eviolite allows it to be really disruptive to a lot of teams, so Thunder Wave, you know, Quash, Feather Dance, Confuse Ray. These are all things that Murkrow can do, and thanks to it being Dark type, you can give it Foul Play, which is not only a play on words, but also a pretty powerful attack for a Pokemon that doesn't want to invest in its offensive stats. Rampardos I'm also putting in the B tier. I think Rampardos is solid. It's not going to be great most of the time. It's kind of like Honchkrow in that it's very frail. It's not super fast, but it hits really hard. The reason it's in a higher tier than Honchkrow is that it hits really, really hard. This is one of the hardest Pokemon to switch into, and we've already talked about how Intimidate is probably going to be less valuable in these games just because there's less good users of it. You don't have Incineroar, you don't have Landorus, so physical attackers should be a bit stronger. But yeah, I think overall, Rampardos is a solid Pokemon and you could definitely make it work. Caesar is one of my favorite Pokemon. I really like it. I think it's really strong. Swords Dance, Bullet Punch, really strong. Technician is a great ability, really great typing, only being weak to Fire type. Not having a ton of natural resistances, but not having, you know, only having one weakness is definitely good. Caesar's just really, really strong. Priority attacks that do damage are always going to be good. That's why part of the reason why Rillaboom is currently good, part of the reason why Urshifu is currently good, and so Caesar does that. It has basically a 60 base power move with Bullet Punch, and it also doesn't even need to run Swords Dance plus Bullet Punch. You can run Choice Band, you can run Assault Vest, you can run a whole bunch of different things, and I think this is another Pokemon that really benefits from the lack of Intimidate in these games. So I think I'm putting in the B tier. It's probably B tier. It's probably not so good that you want to use it like... It's definitely not as good as Raikou, but it actually has some use. I mean, it's pretty bulky with Eviolite. It's actually relatively fast. I believe 105 speed stat, if I'm remembering correctly. Also has access to Technician. I'm gonna have to check if Dual Wing Beat is in this game. I don't believe it is. I think that's an Isle of Armor move shooter move, but even nonetheless, it's actually still pretty decent. You can use Swords Dance Aerial Ace, which never misses. You can run U-Turn. You can run... I'm gonna have to check on Bug Bite as well, but it has basically a bunch of things you could do. You can pretty much run Protect, Swords Dance, Bug Move, Flying Move, and just if the opponent lacks the types that can resist it, or like Steel types, it should be actually pretty threatening. Because of its high base natural speed and decent natural bulk, you can outspeed things, set up on them, especially with the right support, and then after Swords Dance, hopefully start really chunking things for big damage. Shiftry is going in the C tier as well. It might be D tier, but I think you could probably justify some use for it with like Fake Out plus Leaf Storm, Dark Pulse, or maybe Nasty Plot plus Protect. Shiftry is just not a great Chlorophyll user. You'd always prefer something like Venusaur. Even Pokemon like Lilligant are typically better than Shiftry, and Lilligant isn't even a good Pokemon. So yeah, I think the stats are the main thing here. The move pool is okay. It has decent things it can do, but without the stats, it really just struggles. Skuntank, I'm going to put in the B tier. Skuntank is really good defensive typing, actually. This is one of my honorable mentions in the typing tier, in the typing combination video. The thing about Skuntank is that it doesn't have the offenses to really hold up, and the bulk is really not there either. I would say primarily the issue with Skuntank is the base stats. So you have the typing, you actually have a pretty decent move pool. You get Poison, you get Dark, you actually has Fire moves as well for support. The issue with Skuntank is pretty much that it doesn't have the stats to really compete with a lot of other Pokemon. It's really slow. It doesn't have enough bulk to stick. It has like decent bulk, but it's not enough bulk that it really wants to, you know, take a ton of hits and stick around for forever. Yeah, it just like doesn't have it doesn't do anything very especially well. It does a lot of things okay, which is not enough in Pokemon. Next up we have Solrock. I think I'm also putting Solrock in the G tier. This Pokemon just isn't good. It has interesting typing. Psychic and Rock isn't awful. I mean, you're weak to a lot of things with Steel, Water, Bug, Grass, Dark Ghost, just to name a few. There might even be more that I'm forgetting about, but it's kind of like Mawile in that it just doesn't have the stats to do anything. It's not bulky enough to take infinite attacks. It doesn't have the offenses to do enough damage. It doesn't have the typing to really threaten a lot of things either. Psychic and Rock aren't like a great pairing in my opinion. So yeah, really nothing great to say about Solrock. On the other hand, Tyranitar is super good. Really, really good Pokemon. I mean, it's Tyranitar. Do I really have to tell you? It's like, its base stat total is insane, and they gave it Sandstream, which gives it a 1.5 times special defense boost on top of incredible coverage, on top of Intimidate being less threatening. I feel like competitive Pokemon really came into its own in Gen 4. Like, that's where battling really started to be a real thing. And Tyranitar, I think, was like one of the defining Pokemon in Gen 4. So, in both VGC and singles. So, yeah, I'm putting Tyranitar in the S tier. Zangoose is actually okay. It has, I think, Toxic Boost, it's what it's called. It has like an ability that powers itself up if it's poison. Toxicroak plus Facade, though, is really strong and outputs a ton of damage. It's not super fast. If you give it the right support, it can definitely blow through teams. And then We're going to put Dialga in the S tier as well. Actually, you know what? I'm going to bump Ho down in tier. It doesn't feel right to have Dialga in the S tier, in my opinion. But yeah, Dialga's actually really, like, it's a super solid restricted Pokemon. In more recent gens, it definitely doesn't get as much love. I've used it myself before. I won a regional with it in 2016. Dialga has really good defenses, but it sometimes lacks to the damage output to really compete with other restricted Pokemon like Groudon, Kyogre, Xerneas. These are Pokemon with such huge damage output, and though Dialga has better bulk and better defensive typing than a lot of them, it really struggles when it comes to damage output. But those Pokemon that I listed they're not here. We're not talking about them. And within a context of just Gen 4 and below, Dialga's got to be like one of, if not the best restricted Pokemon that you have access to. So yeah, that's my full tier list. The last thing I'll talk about is, do I think their version exclusives are better in Brilliant Diamond or Shining Pearl? I mean, I do recommend you go watch the Shining Pearl one before I give you a conclusive answer. So if you haven't done that, I would recommend doing it now. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think that it's a no contest. Brilliant Diamond exclusives are just way better. I mean, you have Dialga, Tyranitar, Suicune, Entei. The whole S tier here is just pretty incredible. Caesar, and even the Pokemon that are in the middle to lower tiers, I think are also really solid. Now, there's not to say that all the Pokemon here are better than all the Pokemon in the Pearl exclusive decks. I think a lot of these Pokemon are just some of the best Pokemon in the decks, period. And so blocking them behind a version exclusive seems kind of mean to other people. So that's my full tier list. I hope you enjoyed. Please check out the Shining Pearl one if you haven't already. Yeah, I'll be back with more Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl content tomorrow. Thanks for watching.